Hi everyone, thanks for joining or listening to this session. Today we are going to focus on Copilot for Azure. So this is the third session in the current series, and as usual, we'll discuss some concepts and view it from a technology point of view through some demos. These sessions are kept mostly conceptual so that it can benefit anybody. You don't necessarily have to have hardcore architecture or development skills to understand. I give demos to basically instill confidence and help in understanding the concept that I discuss. I'm happy to take it to the next level if you require more insight from a technology implementation perspective. I use Azure platform because I'm an Azure architect most of the time and I have access to resources like GenA models from OpenAI on Azure. But whatever I discuss generally is agnostic to models providers, whether it's Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, GPT from OpenAI, and platform providers like AWS, Azure. I use open source frameworks, language, and tools wherever I have to implement something. The idea is you whatever you learn and understand from this, you can apply it in a manner which is more suitable to your environment. I also have a LinkedIn group called AI Mantras. If you have not joined, feel free to join. I post latest technology trends, market insights. That is very small, uh, bite-sized information that you can, consume regularly instead of going through a large body of text. This is the fourth series. I had three series in the past. I've got recordings of all those sessions, and I've added those links in the invite that I've sent. Feel free to go through them in case you missed it. Also, let me know if you need some clarification or you like to know more on certain areas. So today we are going to talk about um, Copilot for Azure. And before we do that, let's understand what is a Copilot. And I've used this image, which is again generated using GenAI, to illustrate uh, what is a Copilot. And I'm using an aeroplane uh, as an analogy where the aeroplane itself is a system or an application, and it is being flown by a human being called pilot who represent a user of that system. And you, along with the main pilot or pilot, you have a co-pilot, uh, which is a human being in the practical sense while you're flying an aeroplane. But essentially, the purpose of the co-pilot is to provide assistance and support to the pilot. Pilot is in command. Um, Pilot gives instructions, command, asks for things from the co-pilot, and in turn facilitated by a lot of things that co-pilot does in order to fly smoothly. And a co-pilot, which is a term Microsoft has invented or coined, is kind of very similar. So you probably have application platforms or systems, application like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, systems or platforms like Azure or GitHub Copilot, which is the next session. And what happens? The Copilot is standing by on the side and working based on the instruction that user or pilot tells the Copilot to do or carry out, search something, provide some information based on documentation or knowledge sources. And that is essentially is the concept of Copilot, and that is what we will see. And there are a number of co-pilots we have in Microsoft ecosystems. And the co-pilots or assistants are not just limited to Microsoft offerings. There is an Einstein Copilot with Salesforce. AWS has a lot of offerings. So uh, you would probably see most of the software product incorporating some sort of assistance in the form of Copilot, and that would really improve the user experience and the productivity. So in Microsoft uh, bag, you have Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is your productivity application like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, Teams. There is an assistance or a Copilot option available. It's a paid uh, capabilities. Then you have a standalone Copilot. There's a Copilot for developers called GitHub Copilot. Microsoft applications like Dynamics also have Copilot. And like I mentioned, uh, there is Copilot for platforms. So Power Platform, which is a low-code app development environment, also has a Copilot for different components it has. So it's a dedicated Microsoft Security Copilot, and there's a Copilot for Azure, which is the topic for today's session. Now let's look at uh, some of these Copilots that I have talked about. Um, Go to copilot.microsoft.com or you go to bing.com. What you see is a Copilot, and you have basically a chat interface, and you can ask anything. This is basically free, and it is not just uh, basically a Copilot in terms of sending your prompt to a model, but also can help, for example, by giving you references that is basically used to ground the response. Then we have Copilot in Azure. So Azure being a platform, you have a Copilot assistance available in Azure, and we will go through more details about Copilot for Azure in this session today. Then you have, like I mentioned, Power Platform. So this is Power Automate Desktop, which is sort of a robotic process automation tool. And what you see here is a Copilot baked in. So you can describe what you're looking for in terms of building an automated workflow. You just type and it'll create those workflow elements. And then we have GitHub Copilot. Now, GitHub Copilot is integrated with Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So you see this side panel, which is the GitHub Copilot panel, and gives you option. So what you probably notice in all these Copilots, uh, there's a there's a set patterns. So there is a panel which surfaces up alongside the application or on the top of the application. It gives you, some starting prompts, or it gives you some guidance to begin with. It has a window on which you can provide a prompt and get an answer. So that's a common pattern across the Copilot. These Copilots are tied to an application, which means their boundaries or their operating uh, context is hooked on to the application it is attached to. Uh, Although they can answer some general purpose questions also, but they're well integrated with an application that it is supposed to be assisting with. So let's go back to the presentation and see. So let's look at more about Copilot for Azure. So, Copilot for Azure is an AI assistant that basically helps manage and optimize your Azure platform, all the resources that you have more effectively and efficiently. Some of the key features of Copilot for Azure are it helps you design the right services, helps you operate them. You can query, ask questions, also, you know, create complex commands, and I'll show you that. And also give a lot of guidance from a well architected framework in terms of cost, scalability, operational excellence, security, reliability. And in case you have some issues, let's say your web app is not performing, it can also help you diagnose and troubleshoot um, the performance or any other related issues. Behind Copilot for Azure, there is an LLM. Um, Microsoft uses GPT models, basically, which is the brain behind Copilot in Azure. And let's see the architecture. So if you go, like I've shown you, if you go to portal.azure.com, you will see something like this. On the right, there is a panel called Copilot. Um, Copilot for Azure, it is still in preview for the time being. And you also have a mobile version, which is absolutely uh, similar in terms of functionality. So what you can do, you can understand the environment, work smarter with services. You can write command line um, scripts, PowerShell scripts for doing a lot of things like managing automation, managing Kubernetes, and also um, you can actually write policies. Policies are nothing but the rules that are subjected when an API request is made on API management or API gateway. Like I mentioned, this Copilot can help you troubleshoot and optimize your resources and gives you, a very efficient um, and in enhanced scenario and task management. So let's get down to the nitty-gritties of Copilot for Azure. So if you see here, you have Azure portal on the right, and you have a Copilot front end, which is the panel that surfaces on the side of your browser when you are on Azure portal. And what it does basically gets the context and action information from the current um, portal page you are in. Let's say you are working in a storage account or let's say a Kubernetes service, it will get that context. Um, and when that input in the form of a prompt is provided, uh, which basically goes to a layer called orchestration. Um, so the prompt and which is a combination of the current context and the actual question is basically used for the orchestration. And the way orchestration works, so it has some grounding is basically this orchestration layer has access to documentations and knowledge bases which are there uh, in Microsoft ecosystems, and it in order to ensure um, the safety, it um, performs both prompt and response level filtering. And beside that, it has multiple plugins. Now, plugins you can think of uh, small micro components that are built to do a specific task. For example, you would have a plugin to cost management, plugin to resource graph that would be used to perform a cost to query, and it may have access to Azure Graph, um, which is basically the database that contains information of all the resources that you have in your tenancy. It may have access to some APIs also, which can then give you some real-time information that is not part of the knowledge base that is used for grounding. And all that is running on an AI infrastructure you have. So you basically have metadata about the current navigational context given to the orchestration layer, and orchestration layer calls the selected plugin. So there is an orchestration through function calling where based on the prompt and the context, um, an AI model determines which plugin to be invoked. And if you have attended my semantic kernel session, that is what basically describes the mechanism. So underneath the orchestration layer, you have a semantic kernel, and that plugin is provided the context, grounding data, and the plugin basically answers or executes that particular task, and the response is subjected to responsible AI to make sure that it is not violating any um, safety principles, and then the response is sent back to the portal. So that's roughly the mechanism. Uh, I mentioned as your um, graph. So there is a management layer in Azure called Azure Resource Manager, which is basically exposed through portal, partial, CLI, REST client. And basically, it is managing all the underlying resources that you have. For example, data source, web app, VMs, any resource on Azure platform is managed by the resource manager. And all the things that are carried out by resource manager are stored in a graph database called as your resource graph, and that basically um, helps you query at scale, again, set of subscription to understand your environment. It helps you query resources with complex filtering, grouping, and sorting. So you have a lot of information and you want to use an AI assistant like Copilot for Azure to really help you understand by querying this um, resource graph, and also helps you apply policy and understand what changes are required. So it will give you option um, to perform actions, so so that you can carry out, and we'll see that in demo. Cost to query language is the language that Copilot for Azure uses in order to provide you information that you have asked in the form of a prompt. So it's a basically simple query language which helps get information. For example, um, so you're looking to find details about changes on the firewall, and that's basically very similar to an SQL command. So let's see what are the things that are possible using GitHub for Copilot. And I'm going to just take you through these different categories, and then we'll have a demo, so that it becomes easy for you to understand. So you'll find um, prompt that can really help you in terms of themes and navigations. Themes is you want to change portal settings, color, um, navigation. You want to switch to a particular resource on Azure. We'll see that. Uh, the other category is to get information. For example, give me a list of top resources. It can also start and stop or shut down a virtual machine. It can provide you list of resources region wise. Then you would have categories for optimization, where you have mm, recommendations that will come from Azure Advisor service. It can also give you recommendation in terms of optimizing the environment, uh, help you find the right naming convention for SQL databases, how to protect storage accounts. We'll see all that. And then you'll have a category of commands which are basically for troubleshooting. Um, you want to know why a web app is not really performing, how you can troubleshoot um, access to a VM through RDP if it is not working. Also get to know what are the open alerts. So that's the kind of category. Another category which is uh, the interactive deployment. Suppose you want to deploy a LAMP stack, and you really don't know how you can do that. So you can just simply um, shoot a prompt that I want to deploy LAMP stack, and what will happen? Copilot will, in an interactive way, navigate you through all the steps in a wizard-like fashion. Take input wherever required. Ask for your confirmation. That will help you, deploy, and we'll see that in the demo. So we are here on Azure portal. You can see I got number of resources. This is my personal account, and you can see the Copilot with some suggestion on the right. Normally, this would be the view. Once you press the Copilot button, you will have this Copilot window or panel appearing on the right hand side. So it'll give you a lot of things. Let's try, some commands that I've discussed just to get a feel. So say let's start with themes and navigation. Suppose I want to use dark mode. So I just prompt change my theme to dark mode. It has the context and it'll change. So basically that's how you do it. Um, this has basically, if I want to go back um, to the standard Azure theme, you can see it'll bring back the light mode or the Azure theme. For example, I want to view. So this portal page is providing me view of all my resources, but suppose I'm on some other page and I want to see what all resources are provisioned under my tenancy and subscription, so it can provide you more detailed view. You can see provides you the type of the resource group name, location, subscription. That's really um, a good way to figure out, and then you can filter and change a lot of things that is more suitable. uh, I want to just have a list, and what I'm just trying to tell you here through this prompt is how the custom query would be running. Again, as your resource graph, like I mentioned, it's a database. and that provides you information. So this is the query it has written, and it has um, project name and location. Project name essentially is the resource name, and the region and the location which is hosting that. Suppose I want to find out um, just about my storage accounts, um, and I can just simply browse all my storage account, and what I get is a view about the two storage accounts that are there in my subscription. Let's say I have one storage account and I want to know uh, how can I protect this storage account. So I don't know how to protect, what level of uh, data protection controls are in place. So I simply write, how can I protect my storage accounts? In this case, what will happen? It will just look at the uh, settings that are configured for this account, uh, and tell me how I can enforce higher protections in terms of doing certain things that are useful. So let me go back to the home page. And so there is a service which is available to all tenants called Azure Advisor. So you can actually go to Azure Advisors and choose a set of resources on which you want some recommendation, or what you can do, you can um, prompt it through Copilot and get all that information. So what is happening in this case, it is basically going through uh, all the resources, and then for each resources there are different uh, recommendations from a well architected framework perspective: cost, security, reliability, operational excellence. And so it will give you recommendation, and that you can use to optimize um, your workloads running on Azure. So let's go back to the home page, and suppose I've got a resource here. This is a function app, but somebody who's not across every type of services or resource like to understand um, more about a particular resource. It could be any resource that you have provisioned. So you can ask, what is this resource? And based on the type of the resource, it will try explaining. Now, what I'm trying to um, show you here is uh, the current context it will take in order to uh, answer your query. Now let's go back and see how you can do something called an interactive deployment. So mind it, this is still in preview, it is still not production grade. So sometimes you may not get uh, the expected response, but you can always try again. So I want to deploy Linux and Nginx, MySQL, Python stack on an Ubuntu VM, and see, it has identified, um, and it'll get into a what is called an interactive mode. Let's see. You can see now, um, it is providing you a cloud shell and give you option in terms of which subscription you want it to be provisioned, and these are the inputs that you like to provide in terms of deploying the LAMP stack under a subscription in a particular location or region. So what is basically happening here, you can see Copilot is basically driving this deployment. So it has got a terminal that can execute commands, and wherever it requires um, input from you, for example, subscription and the location or region is what you need. And then what it does basically creates the right um, set of commands in a script and waits for your confirmation in order to deploy uh, the required resources for LAMP stack. And that is what is an interactive deployment. I won't really go because otherwise I have to unnecessarily delete this resource, but you get the point. So coming back to the presentation, let's summarize what we have covered today. So Microsoft Copilot for Azure leverages AI to provide intelligent insights, automate tasks, optimize costs, troubleshoot, and manage resources efficiently as defined in a well-architected framework. It helps you generate code in the form of scripts, um, and also helps you uh, ensuring compliance from a security standpoint. Copilot for Azure is currently in a public preview and it is available at no additional cost. However, once it is generally available, Microsoft is going to announce the pricing for these capabilities. That's about the today. Let's meet again in the next session where we are going to focus about GitHub Copilot for developer. Thanks. See you again.